Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me and us, the Margilo team. Thank you so much for inviting us to this convention. We really, really love it so far. It's super great. And I'm going to get straight into the topic and share one wisdom with you. And it's not directly related to React Native. It's rather about that you should apply sunscreen even if the sun isn't shining directly, which is a mistake I just did and learned, so sorry for my red lobster skin. So who am I? I'm Hanno Godecke. I'm a software engineer at Margilo. And if in case you don't know what Margilo is an external agency that works together with Expensify, and we are helping to basically build the best product and most performant product for the market. And so far we love the experience, like Margilo and Expensify kind of love each other. And yeah, it's super awesome, it's super great. In case you're wondering what we're working on performance. So this is why this talk is also going to performance. But as of lately, we've also started working on other features in Expensify, which we also love doing. And we built the reactions feature, which got merged just before this conference. And yeah, thanks. Yes, and so far it's a cool feature. We're looking on extending that. So I want to talk about a problem first, a problem that we see very often in mobile apps, and I'm sure many of you have seen the same problem as well before. So imagine that this is a user. This user right now is in a neutral emotional state, and he is about to open an application. Let's see what happens. The user presses on the app icon, and nothing happens. There's a splash screen, and the user is just waiting for seconds, which feel like minutes and hours to the user. And the user's already like, meh, slightly pissed, like that took very long, it should be faster. And the problem doesn't stop there. The user goes into the app and tries to interact with it, and the interaction is laggy. Like the user's pressing on the button, and the button is hanging, or he's pressing something, and it takes seconds until you get to the next screen. And the user by now is like, yeah, fuck, that's a bad experience. The user's pissed. And it doesn't even stop there. So the user is using the app, and the animations are not running at 60 FPS. For a comparison, like we see different FPS animations, and you can see that only the 60 FPS really feel fluid to our eye. Anything else we will notice somehow. And also, that's not adding to a good experience the user's having. And last but not least, the user then noticed that the app is also depleting the battery and is heating the device. And the user is completely pissed by now. He wants to uninstall your product. And yeah, it was just a horrible experience. And the gist of that is nobody likes to use janky mobile apps. I think that's pretty obvious and clear. But the thing is, I have to be honest with you guys from Expensify, when Margilo joined the development on the new Expensify app, we were witnessing like almost all of these issues with the new Expensify app. And my talk today is about how we fixed one performance issue in the app. And while telling you how we fixed this, I'm going to share some wisdom with you. And it's a very simple wisdom, which has great transformative power. It's almost like a little magic spell that if you just follow this wisdom, you will have great results in terms of performance. And I'm going to promise you, it's not going to be rocket science. You don't need an IQ of 200 to understand the wisdom. You are probably even aware of the wisdom, but it's just so important to put emphasis on it. So let's look at the problem that we had when we were joining the new Expensify or new.app. As you can see, it's still in the old scene. And it's the very first interaction the user may have with the app. This is the start screen, so super important screen. Everything should be fluent and fun here. And the user is now pressing on the floating action button. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but the user pressed on it seconds ago. Let me play it one more time. There's the press, nothing happens, and then suddenly this thing opens. And I was even lucky to capture it animating. Like for me, it was sometimes even jump open, which was even more horrible. So let's look at what's going on there. The first important thing to have is when fixing performance issues is to have some measurement in place so we can have some numbers about the problems, about the problem. And then later when we make changes, we can compare and measure again and see if we did any better. So this is super important. So what are tools that we have available for measurement? The first and very obvious one is the performance monitor that you can open through the React Native DevTools. And it shows you like the FPS that you have on the UI thread and the one that you have on the JS thread. And you can see something very important here. It says JS thread minus 2.1 FPS. This doesn't mean that the thread goes back in time or anything, but it rather means that the JS thread is just completely overloaded with work and isn't like it's getting stuck. And every time you see this in an app, you know there's something that you have to fix. It can't stay that way. And something that I would really recommend, or what I personally do, is I always have this monitor open and running. Like when I build a new feature or make some changes, I always have it open. And once I see that things are going wrong there, like the FPS is starting to die, I know, all right, there's something I need to look for. Another tool which is good when doing performance changes is the React Native Performance Monitor Flipper plugin. It's really that long of a name. And what it does is it measures the app's performance over time, and then it includes data like UI thread, FPS, CPU usage, RAM usage, and also like deadlocks of the JS thread. And it's very useful when making comparisons. And now that we have some measurement in place, we have the performance monitor running, we have the Flipper plugin running, we want to find the culprit of the problem. And the thing is, what you could do is you could just open the code, go into it and look through it, but that might not be very efficient and take you some time, and maybe even takes you hours until you find something useful. So we have some tools for that as well. So the first one I want to highlight are the React DevTools, and specifically the profiler. This is available for React Native, but also like in your web browser in Chrome, you can install a plugin, and then you have that there available as well. And what this basically does is you can record what's happening in your app or what React is rendering and committing. So what I do is I open this tool, I click record session, which is this button over there, and then we record what's happening, all the commits that happen. And you can see that there's one very big commit, and we usually want to check out those because that means there was a lot of work going on. And what's even cooler is we can see on the right side what caused this update, and it says base sidebar screen updates, and here we can see the base sidebar screen. And what's awesome about this is I don't even have to know your code. I can start this tool and can record it, and now I know, aha, I have to open a screen, base sidebar screen. I don't even know what the screen is about, but I now know where to look. And what I can see there, if I open the base sidebar screen in detail, is the reason for it re-rendering. And we can see that there is a state change happening. It's not very much readable, but it says is create menu active. So it seems like a component named base sidebar screen re-rendered because of a state change that is called is create menu active. Okay, fair enough. Let's look at the code, and this is like a rough outline of the code. And we have a screen wrapper, sidebar links component. This is like the component that renders all the reports that you see on the start screen, like the chat list. And we have a floating action button, okay, and we have a pop-over menu. And we can see that only the floating action button and the pop-over menu seem to depend on the state is create menu active. The sidebar links or the screen wrapper do not depend on this state, yet we are re-rendering all of these components just by making this state change. So there are some options available to fix this situation. What we could either do is we could memorize sidebar links so that as nothing has changed on the props of sidebar links, it won't re-render. Or what we could do is we could take the floating action button and the pop-over menu and put it into their own component. And by that, move the state like one level deeper. And this is basically wisdom number one I want to share, is that you always should pay attention to place state as low into your React tree as possible. And that follows another wisdom, which means avoid unnecessary re-renders. So we, in the example before, we re-rendered the sidebar links, although we don't need to. And this is just something we want to avoid. So just as a simple outline, you have a component A and B which depend on a state, and there's a component C which doesn't. So we just put component A and B into a subcomponent. And this subcomponent now depends, there's also a state that should be removed. It's not used anymore. But now the state is in your subcomponent, and their component A and B live. So let's take this pattern and bring it to the base sidebar screen. We now have the sidebar links and the popover modal. And in this popover modal, the state change is handled. Now that we implemented some of our changes, we want to test the changes. The first thing to do is pretty obvious. You open the app, you click around and see if it got any better. But think about that we also have our measurement tools there. So we have the React Native Performance Monitor, where we were seeing that the JS thread just completely died. We have the React Native Performance Flipper plugin and the Profiler tool. So when implementing these changes and pressing on the button, it got better. The JS thread didn't die, but there still was like a 1 second delay going on. And this still wasn't a great user experience. When I click the button, the menu should just open. So there was still something else going on. So what we do another session of the profiler with the dev tools. And in fact, we can see now that on the first commit that is happening, the sidebar links aren't re-rendering, and just our floating action button and the popover menu are re-rendering now. These are the only components that need to update. So yeah, this is going well. But if we click a bit further and look for the other commits, we can see that there is another one going on, and that's causing a component named screen wrapper to re-render. And why? Because there's a state change of a variable called modal. So it seems like in screen wrapper, and this is a very top level component which is basically used everywhere around the app, there is a state change going on that's causing a re-render. So let's open that component and search for the modal variable usage. And while looking through that, I noticed that this state or prop which is passed isn't even used for the render output. It is just used for the information of whether when we press the escape key, we should dismiss a modal or not. So we are re-rendering a component for something that isn't even needed for the render output. So here comes wisdom number 2. We should always pay attention to use state only for things that are related to the rendering output. Stuff that's not related to the render output just shouldn't live in the state. It should maybe go into a own local variable. So we could just call Onyx Connect manually and put it in a variable of this class component. Or we could start preventing re-renders using should component update. This is a React component that would work as well. Either ways are fine. You just have to pick with your team, I don't know, and come up with a solution. But once you fix that, and I did that, you see that the results are getting better. When we're now pressing on this floating action button, it's opening the moment I press on it, and I'm not sure if we can see in the video, but now you can actually see that this button has an animation. This wasn't even visible before because this was so badly lacking that you weren't even seeing the animation. So this is looking better now. The animations are visible. It's opening the moment I click on it, but it's not perfect yet, right? So we were running, again, a test with the React Native Flipper plugin, and we can see we don't have a score of 100. And the FPS is still not at 60 FPS. And we want to build a great performing app, just not a okay performing app. So we are still not done yet. So what's going on? There was another very strange behavior when we were just chilling on the home screen and doing nothing, which was that the UI FPS never was at 60, like it was always doing something. And the strange thing is when we were recording with the DevTools profiler, we weren't seeing any re-renders. So this lag is not related to re-rendering. And we were sitting there wondering like, what is going on? Like JS, can you please tell us what you're doing right now? Why are you busy? Please tell us. And the good thing is we don't have to guess what JS is doing. What we can do is we can ask the Hermes inspector, which is like similar to the Chrome debugger. So what you can do is you can create a CPU snapshot and see what JS does under the hood. And we can again record a session and then see the function calls that JS is handling. And I know it's not very readable, but we can see here a start call. It's like a function that is called start that's getting called. And there's like start native animation, Bezier easing, get X for Y something. So it seems like there's some animation going on. So this gives us now a hint where to look. We can now go into the code and search for the start function and see where animations are being executed. And it turns out that in the report screen, which is the one that shows, like the full report, the chat, that there are skeleton loading components, and those are animating the whole time, although the screen where these components are on isn't even visible. So we are animating, although the user doesn't see anything. So here comes wisdom number 3, which is pretty obvious. You shouldn't run animations when the animations aren't visible. Or put another way, you shouldn't do any unnecessary computation. Like, if it's not necessary to do that work at that moment, you just shouldn't be doing it. And so we fixed that. And after that, we can see that we have a performance score of 100. The average FPS is 60 FPS. And the app is now, for that flow, fully performant in the way that it runs at 60 FPS. So let's summarize again. It is important to put state as low as possible and to not have state in a component where other subcomponents would update that do not depend on the state. So only use state for render output related stuff, super important. And another thing is you should always measure during development. This way you can early on catch issues. And what I could add here as well, we recently added to Expensify like a performance regression testing suite. So for main workflows in the app, we should also add like performance regression tests, and they can help us catch those issues. So what are the benefits if you have a great performing app? You have less frustrated users, your users happy, which brings you higher retention rates, and that leads to better ratings and reviews, and people are recommending the app, which basically leads to your business having more happy customers. So people are paying your business more, which means your business makes more money. And if your business makes more money, you can be sure your employee pays you a bigger paycheck. So ultimately, if you apply good performance stuff in your app, you're going to get rich. That's like the gist of this talk. So in that sense, always stay on the side of performance, and thank you for listening. Are there any questions? We can talk about anything performance related in React Native if you have any questions to ask, or maybe about the topic even, yeah?
So final performance fix, you kind of said we fixed it, but I'm wondering how.
Oh, I skipped on that, right? Yeah, that was more like a specific issue. And so as you can see, we have this freeze component, and this is rendered as placeholder. So this will only be visible while we are loading the report screen. And in fact, this uses another skeleton component from a library. And this library has on their components a prop which is animate, and it's a Boolean. So you can basically tell it to animate or not. And what we are basically telling it is, depending on the state of whether we show the placeholder or not, you animate, and only when the placeholder is visible, animate, and other don't. So this is the way it got fixed. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah?
So as far as keeping the state in the lowest place possible, are there any like tools that can be used to like help enforce that, or is it just like you have to remember this step?
Yeah, good question. It would be cool if. Sorry? Yeah, you have to keep that in mind. And this is also where you can screw up, right? So this is why I felt like, okay, this is the most important thing to share here today, to just keep that always in mind. And because by this, you should get by default a very performant app if you're not using any strange native components, but yeah. Yeah?
The GitHub action that runs the regression performance test, that was kind of interesting. I'm curious, like, what your vision is for that, because I think for like the longest time we didn't have like any performance regressions at all. And then all of a sudden we hit one, and it was like a deploy blocker, and then we had no idea like what to do, and we're like trying to revert code, but like nothing we reverted fixed the performance regression.
With the account that has like a lot of traffic, right? But that was bringing the complete app. It wouldn't load at all.
Yeah, it's using mock data. So this is one way to eliminate randomness in these tests. But what was your question specifically about? Sorry?
Yeah, kind of like what's your vision for that tool?
Oh, yeah. The vision is that we, like the main important flows in the app, like opening a new report, sending a IOU request and stuff like that, that we implement tests for that, and so that these main flows are covered. And then in the future, when developers make changes to that, we can see if something goes wrong or not. But I think you were also talking about one issue with the pipeline, or did I get you wrong?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Pipeline.
No, okay. Yeah, so the ideas.
So is it testing just frame rate, or is it testing CPU?
Right now, it's testing time to interaction. So you have to set markers between two interactions, and then it runs the test multiple times. And right now, it's a bit flaky still, so the results are not always super predictable. And one way we want to optimize that is to use CPU cycle count, and we think that we can make it by that more reliable. But yeah, you have to set markers yourself. But we can also add to these markers as well that we collect FPS data, RAM data, CPU data. It's just not being used right now, but it's possible to have this data as well for your performance tests and include that in the reports. Yeah. Yeah?
I have a similar question, Mark. Is there a way that we can kind of automatically, so like if a prop is not being used for rendering, but it's being used for component somewhere else, can we detect that?
Oh, yeah, as you said, you write custom ESLint plugins, right? And I think for the example that we were seeing earlier, where this prop, where is it? Yeah, so maybe for this we can detect it. I think this should be possible with the ESLint plugin. But yeah, to be honest, I've never written a custom ESLint plugin. I just think it should be possible, but we can look into that. That's a good idea, yeah. Okay, any other questions? Yes?
From the screenshots, I saw the dev label up here. So this is the dev environment, or is a production build with the dev environment? And it doesn't matter if you're directly using dev, because dev is core because of development tools and stuff. But you only get React dev tools from dev, and dev guides how to enable it with pro, but not everybody is that in these things.
Yeah, so I think there are 2 points to it. One was, it is, but at some point you maybe want to test it in a release app, that's for sure. So we know the release app is faster. It's just a bit of my philosophy is if it runs fast in the dev mode, it will be also fast in the release mode. You also always have to double check. But yeah, I always try to make it also great in the dev. But sometimes there are issues where you have to export the release app, and you can run for example, the Flipper plugin, you can also run with the release app, so that way you can get FPS metrics, and that can help, definitely. But I'm not sure, was your question also about whether using the dev environment, like backend API dev environment related to that, or not at all? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, again, the Flipper plugin can be used with the release build. Yes?
So 60 frames per second, good metric. But
Yeah.
does that depend to some extent on what hardware you're running this on?
In a way, but like the performance tests you were seeing are running on a very bad phone. So what I like to do is there's called a Geekbench, and their devices, mobile devices, get a score. And what you can do is you should have the data of the devices that your users are using, and you can see what's your average Geekbench score for your users that you're having, and then you maybe have a score of 200, and then you maybe get a device that has a score of 150, and you try to make your app run performant on a device that has this average score, because it also depends a bit on the market, right? If we were just operating in maybe, I don't know, India, we would need to optimize differently. But yeah, it depends a bit, but usually on all recent modern devices, or even like cheap Android phones that cost 100, React Native runs at 60 FPS if you open the app, so this should be fine. Yeah. Yes?
Basic question, how do we enable the FPS rate?
You meant, wait.
Also, is there a way to force it? Because also I was wondering for a checklist, if it's better to add an item to check that the developer enables that in order to, get to see the FPS rate for that.
Yeah, we're talking about this view, right? Yeah. I think it's a great idea to add that to the checklist somehow. And I mean, you can open it by either shaking your device if you have a physical device, and then a menu opens, and there you can press open, how's it called, open performance monitor. Or like if you have Metro bundler running, I think you can press D to open the developer menu, and then you can open this view. I think there are also docs on the React Native website that we could include there to explain it to developers. Yeah. Any other question? Oh, yeah, please.
How does Flipper calculate the scores that we showed?
Oh, yeah, wait. Do we have internet here? React Native Performance Flipper plugin. And I think, yeah, they include their calculation formula here. So it seems to be UI FPS, yeah, you can read it yourself. Like this is how it's working. There's also some explanation how it does that. And, you know, yeah, it's okay to look at the score, but what is more interesting for me is when I do a performance optimization, did the UI frames go up? Did the RAM usage maybe decrease? This is also a good sign that you did something correctly. Stuff like that. But yeah, the scores, you know, yeah. Okay, do we have any other questions? Yes?
Are there any static analysis tools which you think would be useful to use in the REST? Volatility code and any pattern?
Static, like, yeah. We use some for the performance regression testing suite, like to compare the data that we got from the samples. So this is being used there. But you mean like for code analysis or? Yeah, it's interesting. Right now, I don't have any idea, but we could brainstorm about that. Maybe there are some good use cases. Yeah. Okay, cool. Anything else? Or? All right, then thank you so much.